Welcome to the Decarb Connect podcast. My name is Alex Cameron, and I'm the founder of Decarb Connect. And today I'm joined by Eugene Holubnyak, who is the Director of Hydrogen Energy Research, or rather the Hydrogen Energy Research Center at the School of Energy Resources in the University of Wyoming. As everybody who listens to this podcast know, I always start with a spectacularly lazy interviewer question, which is basically to get my guests to introduce themselves. So Eugene, could you tell us a bit about how you've arrived at this point in time? What's brought you to do the work that you're doing in hydrogen? And we'll start there and then talk a bit more about what you're focused on.
Alex, thanks for having me on your podcast. I actually prefer the self-introductions because it's a good conversation opener. So how did I arrive at this position? It's a good question. I do have a diverse background. So my education is kind of all over the place. It's a flavor of mechanical engineering and IT, and then aerospace engineering, and then applied geoscience. But my career was basically focused on energy transition projects from the get-go. So I worked in research and development. I worked for ERC, which is Energy and Environmental Research Center in North Dakota. And I started there working on CCUS, basically carbon management, and some of the energy storage and geothermal and unconventional oil and gas projects. And then I transitioned to Kansas Geological Survey. And in Kansas Geological Survey, it was basically the same continuation of the same pathway where I was looking into commercialization of the same energy transition projects, but maybe at a little bit different level. So starting as an engineer, but then transitioning into a more managerial role, where I would have to cover not only engineering parts, but also would be concerned with policy, regulations, and other aspects of the field. And then after that, I joined the University of Wyoming School of Energy Resources, where I'm basically heading the newly extended research center of excellence on hydrogen. And the School of Energy Resources and the ERC and also Kansas Geological Survey, they're kind of unique units on campuses at the universities. They're not exactly your standard departments that are tasked with regular academic work. So it is a little bit more applied, and we normally deal with higher TRL in terms of research TRL projects, and basically ultimately hand those technologies to the commercial sector to make them fully commercial. So we're kind of working on that commercialization pathway, and we're kind of the last standing post before we go into the full commercialization aspect of this.
We're going to talk about, obviously some of the work, the projects that you're involved in, but your day-to-day role at the center, how would you describe that?
Well, it is considered to be an administrator, but because the center is newly organized, it's a bit of everything. So it's a little bit of promoting the center. It's a little bit of organizing, everything from finances to making sure that I do have people who share the same mission with me, and then looking for funding, and then working on already funded projects, moving science forward.
Okay. All right. Well, let's sort of set the scene a bit. So we're going to be talking about Wyoming, obviously, and the piloting and testing work that's being done around hydrogen, not just individual projects, but also what the potential landscape could be like on a wider level. But before we do that, just bear in mind that we have people listening to this from all over the world. So give us a little bit of a sense of what the energy landscape is like in Wyoming already, and why that could lay interesting ground for hydrogen economy, for hydrogen technologies to gain traction in the next couple of years.
So Wyoming is a very interesting place. We always have been a state that is an energy exporter, and not only energy, but resources by and large. We do have a very low population compared to other United States And that comes certain both perks and challenges, right? So we do have energy infrastructure in place. We are number one in terms of coal exports, and we are definitely out there, meaning in leading places in terms of natural gas and oil production, and of course export, and also associated products as well. Recently, with the new aspirations to maintain a little bit more sustainable energy portfolio, both in the state but also around us, basically in the markets that are very important to us. Changes in policies call for changes in portfolio of energy products, and hydrogen is part of that portfolio that probably will be changing in this landscape. And so, of course, we are very high up there in terms of the fossil fuel sort of energy generation. We have an enormous wind resource, which we are using. Wind energy projects are coming into the space. There's also talks about nuclear power. And not only talks, there are projections that are coming in the state, and there are potentially there is a market for things like data centers that will be major energy users, and other additional industry players that are looking into the space to have their bases and or some of their capacities to use the energy in our space are coming as well.
Okay, so I imagine that much like the conversations that are going on around Houston and much of Texas, Wyoming has this similar need to ensure that their current industry, their current exports, have a sort of an over time transition, and that there are a kind of opportunities for the economy further along the line. So it's partly what we're going to be talking about today is more about the technology piloting, but the background is obviously a state and its economy and its need to sort of make it self-sustainable in the long term as well.
Absolutely, and as I mentioned, it's changes in markets and policies around us in the states that consume our energy. Places like California, Nevada, Oregon, Washington change their outlook on energy. So they're banning their fossil fuel-driven vehicles in the near term, in the near future. They're also not very fond of natural gas in maybe a little bit long-term future as well. And so that maybe hydrogen would become a better alternative, and also possibly just in general power generation could be a little bit more of become a little bit more of a staple for Wyoming as well, with energy transmission lines coming to other states as well, and hopefully pipelines for hydrogen too. But also maybe there's going to be more opportunities to explore more resources that Wyoming has to offer. There are things like mining that the state prouds itself in, and so with mining, yes, of course, coal mining is there, but there are other minerals and resources that Wyoming has that potentially could be mined and also exported elsewhere. Okay,
so we're here to talk hydrogen. We're going to be talking about the Western States Hydrogen Hub. Before we do that, I guess one of the questions that we talked briefly about when you and I first connected was, to what extent, obviously lots happened this year. 2022 was a big year for US federal policy and in many states, state policy. So in terms of the hydrogen ambition of Wyoming and this Western States Hub, what was already in motion versus what might be kicking up a gear or made more possible by this kind of recent expansion of policy and available incentives?
So Alex, just like you mentioned, of course, policy changes are enormous, and the Inflation Reduction Act, but also previously in 2021, there was Infrastructure and Jobs Act. Both of those enable basically open the gates for hydrogen energy and CCUS which also relates to hydrogen quite a bit because it's part of the same ecosystem. And with that, we see intensification on the industry side, on commercial side, for companies looking for projects. And so because Wyoming was previously looking into this direction, into energy transition direction, including CCUS, it is a little bit easier for projects to be standard here in this state because of the existing policies in Wyoming that are defining basically for the industry. I cannot even say that they're helpful or not helpful. They basically are certainty for companies that they can move forward because they understand the operational space. They understand what kind of pore space regime is going to be here, what kind of underground injection control is going to be imposed on a lot of their activities. And so with that, we see major projects, major companies moving in Wyoming in this space to basically stand their energy production here to make sure that they can utilize the credits coming from a 45Q, expanded 45Q, and so on. And for the hydrogen, it kind of provided the same sort of landscape where companies knew that, okay, we now know where to move to. We now know how it's going to be operational, and we now know that there's a lot of supporting policies that can enable projects to move forward. And even before the hydrogen hub, there's a number of incentives that the state put together. So there's Wyoming Energy Authority that was standard recently, and basically it's energy office in our state that helped to fund, basically provided seed funding for a lot of hydrogen projects. And so there's both blue, meaning hydrogen, which is generated from natural gas with CCUS projects that were happening before the hydrogen hub, and also green, which means generated from renewable power projects that were basically standard here in the state of Wyoming, even before the hydrogen hub came into the picture.
Okay, well then let's step into the hydrogen hub then. Just can you paint a bit of a picture about what this might be the kind of counterintuitive, but start the other way around. Where do you think it's going to be in a decade, 15 years time? Like, what's the ambition in that kind of timescale? And then let's have a look at who is involved right now. But yeah, let's start with what you see coming down the track for that hub operation.
For the hub operation, it's a very interesting kind of, again, like I call those questions the crystal ball type of question. And the crystal ball question, of course, is that how certain can I be if this is going to be the case, because who knows how it's going to turn out. And so to start that, to preface this is that we do produce, store hydrogen today. There's about 1,600 miles of hydrogen pipeline on the Gulf Coast currently operational. I mean, it's not a lot compared to other infrastructure. It's not a lot, but there's also ammonia pipelines that are in place, both here in the United States and internationally. And knowing that the hydrogen space is growing not only specifically in hydrogen, but also things like ammonia and methanol and other basically liquid organic hydrogen carrier fluids, like this is how they're called. We can say that this infrastructure will likely to grow. And the reason I'm very optimistic about this is in Wyoming is, again, because we do have the infrastructure in place for CCUS. There are rights of ways that are currently in place for CO2 pipelines, and because there's kind of general understanding of how to move those tricky fluids that previously they were not in that scale of operation. And but the main concern remains is that how do we scale this up? How do we make it 10 times what the current carrying, producing, and using capacity is? And so that is going to be tricky. But again, I'm optimistic about this. I think Wyoming and Colorado, New Mexico, Utah will become a regional hub where both CO2 is produced, stored, and moved into the markets. And because in general we are low in population, yes, of course, Colorado has a little bit more than Wyoming, definitely. There are population centers around us, no doubt about it. But in terms of the scale, I think most of that hydrogen production ultimately is going to be moving outside of those four states, most likely to the shores, either to Houston area, basically, and to California and Washington, to major, basically, population and production centers.
So in terms of how the hub might look and feel, though, like what are you expecting? Because I suppose if let's bring it back to a UK experience for a moment. You take something like a Net Zero Teesside or some of the hubs we have here. There's a sense of both who the industrial customers might be, what the assets are that are going to be developed, and so forth. What do you think are the primary assets, for example, that might be developed as part of the hub program?
So currently, we see that there's a lot of wind, basically renewable generation capacity is being built, and a lot of projects that are moving into the space to produce hydrogen with green electricity. We'll see how sustainable those are because of the water is scarce. So we'll see. Hopefully, this point will be basically it's a matter of getting to the water rights and using water in a sustainable way, right? Sustainable fashion, so to make sure that everyone is fine with those projects using water. So I'm optimistic about this, but also I think in ultimately larger scale projects will be fossil fuel generating at first. Until the electrolysis process will be understood a little bit better, because I mean, yes, it is simple process, but yet at the same time, it is not optimized to the level where we would like it to be. It is still expensive. There's still a question about the feedstock for very pure water for electrolysis. So most likely, very large scale projects that produce a lot of hydrogen will likely be the blue hydrogen generation coming from natural gas, some of the purified water coming from the basically natural gas production in place. And so Wyoming is sort of lucky in this space because yes, we have produced water coming from those projects, but this produced water oftentimes is very low salinity, so it is theoretically could be treated cheaper than other options. And so with that, I think a lot of the first large scale projects are going to be blue flavor, and that also comes another challenge. If you start having a lot of capacity, production generated, then how do you supposed to move it? Pipelines are tricky. Yes, of course, we do have a lot of capacity. We're better positioned than other states, I think. But even in our case, pipelines are not going to be built overnight. It's going to be a longer process with a lot of negotiation and land rights and so on and so forth. And so, especially in a place like hydrogen. And so, before that, it's going to be moved somehow else. And so it's probably going to be blended in the existing pipelines. So we'll be burning it probably at first in the existing natural gas power generating plants, and then also moving it via rail and or truck in a smaller scale for the retail market as well.
Okay, and getting that crystal ball out again, like if you had to make a guess, how soon or when do you think there might be some commercial operations up and running, like really the beginnings of what would become more of a statewide economy?
So my guess would be, and this is coming also from discussions with the operator and companies, their timeline is about 5 to 10 years, most likely. And this is coming from very large scale operators with in financing already in place with their own finances, or investors that are already behind them. So if I would have to guess, it would be at least 5 years to 10 years timeline.
Okay. And then you sort of alluded there to the operators and developers that are already in the mix and in conversation. So who is involved, either public entities or private entities right now, and what kind of groups do you still need to draw in to really flesh out this plan, do you think?
So there are a couple of challenges here. So there are large companies, and there's a public concept paper for the hub that was published recently, and this is something that you can take a look at and see what kind of, I don't exactly remember what kind of information is open or not, but based on the information that is publicly available, there is a variety of companies that are playing in the space, and a lot of them are midstream providers, companies like Williams, companies like Tallgrass. There are also power generating utilities. Basically, it's BlackRock. It's major utilities that are present in this area. They're definitely are interested in hydrogen providing, and basically using hydrogen and also producing hydrogen, both components of that. And then there's a variety of startups and smaller companies and things, that are very much present in the space. We will see how they will become, in the coming years. But there are wind generating projects. There are also tribal entities that are moving in, especially in New Mexico. There's at least 5 tribal entities that I know of that are looking into either utilizing or producing hydrogen from solar and from wind and from other sources as well. So that's the kind of general landscape. And in terms of startups, there are startups that are trying to utilize coal resources. There are startups that are trying to utilize and natural gas, and a lot of them are actually in this green generation space for both solar and wind as well. And then for the component that is using hydrogen, so this ecosystem is also growing, and I know that there's a lot of concerns that it's probably kind of a little bit less defined space, but yet at the same time, I'm aware of multiple companies that are hydrogen production side, that they have the agreements with multiple users of hydrogen for the offtake. And so what is potential offtake? It's definitely distribution centers, and probably another part that is coming. It's Class 8 trucks, large trucks, semi trucks that could be potential user for hydrogen. So beyond the electricity and power generation.
I mean, obviously the Western states, it's a collaboration across these states, but Wyoming particularly has, I guess, some real benefits for infrastructure builders, particularly around permitting. And I know we ran an event not long ago in DC where the big thing that just kept coming up everywhere, especially down in some of the Gulf states, was the challenge of permitting, and how over a stretch of a dozen or 50 or 100 miles or more, you could be in many different jurisdictions that needed to be navigated carefully. Not the case in Wyoming, or slightly simpler? How would you describe that?
I would be like I said, I would be a little bit more optimistic about this, because just in general, how receptive the state is and how it is willing to change and diversify the portfolio, just to be sure that we're moving into the sustainable energy production generation and resource production and generation. So I am a little bit more optimistic about this. I do have some of the experience of this and the flavor of this in Kansas, where it is not as as easy to move forward. Although Kansas is a pipeline friendly state, it was not as easy to move forward the CO2 pipelines. But for hydrogen infrastructure here, just in general in the region, I'm more optimistic. And again, it's gonna be tricky, but like I said, it's not gonna be overnight because there's a kind of perception right now in the kind of broader scene that pipelines are going to happen next day. Tomorrow we'll have pipelines. No, it's not. It's not going to be the case. It's impossible. And so with that, I think the blending will come first, and then the next is going to be some of the dedicated pipelines will be built.
Okay, and before we just take a look at where some of the investment is coming from, obviously we've talked about the fact that some of the funding can come from, well, it has already come from some state-led programs, but there is going to be the opportunity for some federal-based funding, but that comes with obligations, right? And I forgive me, the US listeners, because you will probably already know what these types of obligations are. But again, for the international audience, what are some of the things that you have to take into account if you are taking federal money and incentives?
Basically, if not for federal support, this space is not going to be. It would not be as exciting as it is today. This is real. We have to acknowledge it. If not for the federal support, this space would be a lot more dull. This needs to be put forward. But I need, as a person who deals with federal funding all the time, with Department of Energy grants. They definitely come with a certain caveats, and one of those is a reporting that is maybe a little bit more strenuous than normally would be in the industry, because industry doesn't care that much about reporting on progress of certain things. It's much simpler inside the industry. And it's a lot less sort of strings attached. So with DOE, you have to comply with certain procedures, and this is where some companies, not all of them, but some companies find it a little bit more taxing on their day-to-day operations. And then there's a certain amount of information that you will have to release because it's a publicly funded project. You'll have to release some of that information to the public. And then there's another layer to that, that, okay, you have your reporting, you have your kind of open books, a little bit of open book type of situation where, well, after some period of time, you'll have to release some of that information. But on top of that, there's another kind of component where, of course, companies that are more established would be looking to get the funding from federal side, but then also the startups would be looking to. The problem with startups is that it is uncertain if these companies will survive longer. But if you ask me, those entities require the federal funding more than some of the established companies. Oftentimes, those established companies already have very deep pockets and investors that are interested in coming in. So if it was me, I would be maybe paying attention a little bit on that kind of up and coming companies end. But I do understand that it is a very peculiar situation where you have to be very careful about how you judge who is going to be the recipient of the funding. So that's kind of the what comes with the funding. It's basically reporting an open book, and of course not all of the companies are comfortable with that.
So let's look aside from the kind of federal, state, financial aid that's available to be tapped into. Are you yet seeing much sign of the private sector bringing funds to the table? Like, are there people putting their hands up? Are they just sniffing around a bit, or what's the kind of? How would you describe the kind of discussions and the level of interest at the moment?
The level of interest in projects, both actually the CCS side and And maybe maybe it's another point to kind of explore how CCUS is related to hydrogen. But the space is kind of in terms of private funding. Private investors are much more interested than they used to be, and that happened basically sort of overnight in the recent couple of years. And those private investors, private entities, a lot of them are you can actually divide them. I'm not going to be naming names. It's a little bit too sensitive, but the landscape is like this. So you have Canada that released their basically carbon stick. So the federal investments here, 45Q, 45V, others, there are carrots. So they are incentives at that. They're not punishing. But Canada decided to punish. And if you emit CO2 in the future in Canada, then you will have to pay your carbon tax. And that carbon tax cost quite a bit of money. I'm not sure about the exact number. There's a little, I'm much more well versed in the domestic market, in the domestic space, but in Canada it's at an order of $200 per ton of CO2. It's a quite substantial tax that comes with the carbon generation, and with that we see entities like pension funds stepping in, and they are very certain investors that are definitely are interested in picking projects to move forward. And so we recently saw not only companies like large operators receiving those funds, but actually more of the startup type of companies moving into the space with a lot of support and backing from different entities. And so, but also there is private investment coming, like from places like BlackRock and similar entities that back the regular oil and gas projects, but also power utilities and wind and solar generating options. And the same with the use side, we see the same. The private investors are waking up and actually funding the space.
So we're seeing the kind of increase of interest from private. We've got these kind of federal and state pillars, if you like, that are ready to support. I guess the next part of this that's needed, especially if it's going to be led by renewables, is technology like energy storage. So energy storage and also the other components of a healthy hydrogen value chain. How much of that exists right now that you think is needed for this hub, and how much is part of the whole development cycle?
Well, the way I look at hydrogen is primarily as a energy storage vehicle. It's very efficient way to store energy, and both on the large scale and on the smaller scale as well. And in terms of existing projects, currently we know how to use large scale storage for hydrogen. There are several places that companies like Linde and there are a couple of others that are looking at. But currently there are operational projects, and one in the UK with the bedded salt storage, and it's been operational for some time. And there's domal salt projects on the Gulf Coast, and then of course there's Utah project that is funded by Department of Energy that will become operational at some point of time. It's currently under construction. We'll see how efficient it's going to be, but it's a major project. The magnitude of at least the federal side was about 500 million invested in this. So that's kind of the range of the investment in that project. So we will learn more about this, but it's not widespread at the moment. We don't know exactly how it's going to be operational, but it is very promising. Very promising tech, and a lot of companies seems to be understanding that it could work for their portfolio. And if we're talking about moving renewable energy on the next to the next level, and to make funding of those projects sustainable, we'll have to think about hydrogen storage as a component of the energy storage portfolio.
And how about the rest of that value chain around this hub? What else is sort of maybe still a bit kind of conceptual rather than solid, would you say?
Well, actually, one more, maybe even not even in the technical side, but there's a kind of soft side about this. And so there is a public awareness, and kind of people right now are, from what I understand, are kind of hesitant, on the hesitant side about hydrogen. You know, just general public is excited about this, but I cannot say that they're supportive or they're against it. And so the educational component is very important and needs to happen. And then there's another component, which is the underprivileged, basically depressed communities that are result of a lot of change, basically tectonic changes in how the economy works and how society works in general. But nevertheless, I think these parts need to be addressed as well as we move forward, and hopefully hydrogen can bring additional jobs and or job security to some of those communities as well. And then the third one, which is kind of concerning too, and kind of not well understood what is exactly happening in this space, is the workforce. So one thing that is understood, that yes, there needs to be more training for in this space. We need more people who are who understand how to deal with hydrogen in general. And yeah, there's some retraining and so recertification that is going to be happening. That's number one. But then the second component is that companies need personnel today, and I know that a lot of them, many of them, are struggling to find candidates for their positions, and it is a bit puzzling. Nobody is sure in what is happening, why it is happening, and probably will require like additional investigation in this space. But these kind of soft components of the hub are very important. Of the hub, but in general, just hydrogen and at that energy transition economy will be very important.
Yeah, the personnel issue came up in another podcast I did recently with H2 Green Steel, and talking to Kesa there, we would, you know, she made the point that they had been deliberately hunting globally for the talent that they needed, and she sort of predicted that whilst everyone at the moment is obsessed around the technology and the capability and the possibility, she's like, the real battle is going to be for those that have any level of experience in hydrogen technology. It's going to be, you know, very hard to recruit those people, you know, in the next 5 to 10 years.
Right. No, I think this is spot on. I hear the same from multiple directions, and multiple companies and different stakeholders are very concerned about this. Yes.
Okay. Well, we're going to sort of wrap up in a moment, but let me just bring back the conversation to the work you're doing right now at the Hydrogen Energy Research Centre. So obviously, you know, we've been talking about this hub and so many things that are really, you know, we're talking 5, 10, 15, 20 years, but right now, what are the parts of the puzzle that you and your team are trying to unpick, or what are the elements that you're really focused on in the very short term that are sort of building blocks, perhaps, to bringing this online?
Our team at the School of Energy Resources is there are several kind of key areas. So we support our technical expertise. We support WISH and WISH Hub, and hopefully we'll continue doing this in years to come. We think it is a very interesting project, and we hope that it will be basically building this infrastructure around hydrogen ecosystem in our states around us. And so that has been kind of one of the focuses of our center, but moving forward, there are other areas that we also support. So we do support those several projects that are happening in the hydrogen space, again, providing technical expertise to both the green hydrogen generation with Williams, and then there's a Blue Bison project for the tall grass. So this is something that we supported, and there is also Jonas, that's a more local kind of company that is natural gas producer, natural resources producer too. So they're very interested in hydrogen too. So we're trying to support them. And then we also apply for funding for future grants. And so one of the projects that is currently pending is a desalination with a steam methane reforming module that we're building together with Los Alamos National Lab, Williams, and the local manufacturer engineering company. John Cornish is one of those people who will support us in this endeavor. And then there's also a hydrogen energy storage project also with Los Alamos and Anschutz that we are looking forward to. So hopefully both of those will get funded, maybe at least one, but we'll continue moving that space, that kind of our niche where we are looking at the higher TRL projects and moving them into the commercial space.
And if you had a wish, for the kind of companies you'd like to see stepping into this, or maybe it's the finance side, could be the finance, could be technology, anything. Who would you most like to see engage with this right now, rather than delaying or being a future partner? What's needed now to move it forward, do you think?
No, I think everything is moving in places. Actually, we are very blessed with the support from multiple industrial partners, and the reason for this is that they're very much interested in the space. They're also kind of, they're not certain if it's going to work or not, but they're very hopeful about this, and they're doing every right steps. They're moving into this decision, into this space, very diligently. The thing that I'm actually very optimistic about is that a lot of the companies that we are dealing with, they are very serious about this, and they do have their best talent looking into the hydrogen space. In particular, I'm very impressed with Williams, with Anschutz, with the with tall grass, with the level of involvement and the level of talent that they throw at these projects. So it's very, very impressive, definitely. So.
Right. Well, Eugene, thanks so much. I know it's always a big ask to say to someone, describe hydrogen in Wyoming, but I think you've done a good job at sort of mapping out what's happening, and also really this kind of chunky hubs plan that's evolving, and sounds like it's evolving at quite a pace now. So thank you very much for that. And anyone that is listening, I will do my best to get the Western States Hydrogen Hub concept paper as one of the links in the pod notes. And I'll also be asking Eugene for some links to the work of the Hydrogen Energy Research Centre, so that you can understand a little bit more about what the School of Energy Resources is doing too. But Eugene, thank you again.
Alex, thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you for this opportunity to talk a little bit about Wyoming and my center as well. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.